like people say these kind of things all the time on pitches. Yeah, it is insulting in that moment, viewed from Sexton's side of things. But obviously Ireland have dished it out. I think Ireland, that team dished it out more than most, really. Like they got in so many little kind of spats with the Kiwis in 2022, with the Scots every single time they play. We don't know what's said every time there. So it's no great shock to me. But even in this instance, like it's so authentically Johnny Sexton. There's three excerpts here. They're quite short, but like it's Johnny Sexton down to a T. And that's what excites me about this book so much, is that clearly there's nothing hidden. If you hated Johnny Sexton and you read these three bits of the book, you'll hate him even more. If you loved him, you'll love him even more, because this is who he is. You mentioned the referee thing. Like there's two kind of calls about the refereeing in that game. One about Wayne Barnes and that penalty. The other one about and I'm quoting here, the referee's bias against your loose head's technique, even when he's dominating his opponent in the scrum. Like he always gets those bits in there as he did. There's this spikiness, there's the competitiveness of him, there's the utter self-belief in that same kind of excerpt. He talks about, he says, I'm still convinced we were the best team in the tournament, that our world ranking was accurate. I know I'm biased. I know that South Africans and others will tell me to look at the record books, but it wouldn't be the first time that the best side in a sports tournament didn't end up winning it, which will unbelievably piss off a lot of people. But that's him. Like he's utter belief in his ability, his team's ability. And then there's even, just after he talks about Ioane, there's even a little kind of funny bit, and that's the side of James will probably give us great insight into this. Like all I've heard is that he was great crack, and he, even in the media stuff, he actually could be quite self-deprecating and funny at times, not like a comedian. But the bit where he talks about his son Luca, that lovely moment where his son looks up to him and says, "You're still the best dad." It was captured at the time. It was a really lovely human moment. He goes on and he says, "I was so proud of him that he knew exactly the right words to say at that moment. He must get his emotional intelligence from his mum." And like, it's not hilarious, but it's a nice little kind of self-deprecating comment that after these kind of revelations of what Ioane said, just kind of simmer the tone down. So I think the passage is really authentic, forthright, revelatory in that instance. I'm sure there's other instances, and indeed in the excerpts there's other instances where Sexton reveals things that make him look really bad, including the time where he gets stuck into Leo Cullen and splits him over the eye because he's frustrated about Rowan O'Gara and his place in the team. So it's not like he's kind of protecting himself completely, but I think it's brilliant. It's great that we know what was said there, and if you're taking offense to that, you probably need to check yourself. But it's riled up the Kiwis as well, which is also a good side effect of this.
A little bit biased from our end, but I always think it's worth pointing out that when an autobiography is ghostwritten, that the ghostwriter in this instance, Peter O'Reilly, does an enormous amount of work here in allowing the athlete to open up, or encouraging that, and helping them to find the right words at times to actually eloquently put into context all of the things they're talking about. And I would have imagined that after the World Cup, both Sexton and Peter O'Reilly would have been under pressure to try and get this book out for last Christmas, because imagine the business it would have done for the publisher, and I presume for the two of them as well at the time. But like the fact that they decided to take their time with it and examine things in the cold light of day, give it an additional year really to finish it, actually bodes so well to me, because it doesn't feel like any of this is going to be rushed. It's just going to be Johnny Sexton distilled, having had a little bit of time to think about some of these things, even in contrast to where he was reacting in split-second circumstances on the pitch. The Ioane thing is probably the most controversial. Controversial is probably not the right word, but it's caused probably the most noteworthy storm in various countries since the extracts came out. James, I don't know, did you see Izzy Dagg's reaction to it? He was speaking on his SENZ show, Scotty and Izzy, and the former All Black, friend of this podcast, by the way, he said, "Just accept it, mate. Give it a rest. Ireland tend to throw a lot of chat out there because they're winning in between World Cups. But come World Cups, you just don't. You don't win it. Obviously, the comments were pretty harsh and they probably hurt your feelings, but you were retiring. People don't forget when you toured New Zealand and you said some things to our very own All Blacks. They're going to bottle that up for the big occasions. They bottled it up nicely, and you guys bottled it over there in the quarterfinals. That's just the way it goes." So there are legs to this. There are legs to this. James, you've been on the field and you've had some obviously phenomenal victories. particularly with Leinster, but I'm sure you've been on the wrong end of results and a few words here and there as well. What was your interpretation of what Sexton alleges Ioane to have said to begin with?
I think the what's firing up a lot of people in reply of, I've seen good few people have been like, well, oh man, he said you're a shit Richie McCaw to Kane and all the other things. And I think for me, the context is very important. So the comment, get back 10, that little bit of shithousery, when the game's done, but it hasn't been kicked out yet. I'm good. I'm good with that. He could have actually said anything in that moment and I'd be good with it. It's when the final whistle goes, that he's an all-time great, regardless if you hate his guts. He's an all-time great for a country and a huge rival over the last couple of years. You've done the job on him. You've had multiple opportunities to say what you want on the field and, take physical shots at him, do whatever you can do. And I think that's the bit that murky. I think some people's water it's crystal clear to me. As soon as the whistle goes, that's no longer on the field banter, because if you hit someone when the whistle goes, that's assault. If you hit someone before the whistle goes, it's not. So like there is a big differentiation between when the game is still on versus when the game is off. And that's why it just doesn't sit right with me. It's just like you're shaking hands, just even if you hate his guts, you got the little shot in about to get back 10. That's pretty funny, like and light. You had all game to say whatever you wanted to him. I just think you don't stick the knife in that moment, and that's the only reason it's angered me in the way it has is that it's like I'm all for sledging, I'm all for everything, but there's a difference between sledging when you can play them again, or they get another chance of redemption, or you're on the field versus, the lowest moment of someone's career, but also the last moment, and you take that opportunity to stick the knife in. That's the only reason it doesn't sit right with me. It'd be different if Johnny wasn't retired. Again, I think it wouldn't sit as badly with me because he'd have another chance to play him again. But it's known that he's never going to get a chance to have a go at you or to be able to get you back. I think it's just cowardly in that way.
I've seen a lot of Kiwis who have found it only entertaining. And I wonder to what extent is our discomfort with it just because we have an emotional attachment to an absolute legend of Irish sport. And in your case, you played with Johnny, you know him, you like him as a human being. Like, does that play a role here? If the roles were reversed, for example, and if we had come out on the right side of this rivalry, having lost a few tests to New Zealand in the last 4 years, and if an Irish player had said something to, I'm trying to think who retired for the All Blacks. Let's just say Sam Cane was retiring or something like that. Like, would we find it funny then? Is it just because we're on the wrong end of this?
But it's not Sam Cane retiring; it's Dan Carter retiring for them. You know what I mean? It's not just a stalwart retiring; it's one of the greatest ever for the country. So, like, if an Irish player had said something like that to Dan Carter, there'd be a fair split of people who wouldn't be happy with that player. I think anyway. And listen, correct me if I'm wrong. And again, I am aware that I'm going to have my biases. Listen, I dislike Johnny during at times as well when he's had pops off me or in different ways. But I no matter what, you got to respect him for what he's done and how he turns up and who he is as a human. Even if you don't like him, you got to respect him. And just I do like him, but I'm just saying at moments I've definitely not liked him. But how can you not respect what he's done for the game? Never mind what he's done for Irish rugby, and that's the main reason behind the timing of what you're saying. It's the context of it. It's who it is. One, because the comment gets forgotten about if it's just a player who's had a good career that finishes, but when it's arguably your best ever and who's changed the trajectory of Irish rugby and been part of that and led that, there's a little bit more weight behind those words than just saying it to someone else who's retiring.